Hello and welcome to episode 833 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I am one of the co-founders here at ETR, and we are coming off of the end is here kind of week. Yes, that's right. This will, sadly, be the final solo pod of the 2024 NFL season. I might pop on here at some point during the offseason if something comes up, but you're going to have to live without your sex jokes on the internet for a bit here. During this downtime, an important thing we can do, of course, is review the data from the past season and try to get better. You know, what was your DPT, your depth per thrust? What was your OPA, your orgasm probability added? And then, of course, our most important metric, what was your launch angle / exit velocity combo? Did it triangulate in the optimal range? Right now, I'm implementing a strategy of 1.4 beers, one joint, close my eyes, pray for the best method. But of course, we'll use the off season to review all the data. Anyways, two biggest places I put my money this NFL season were best ball and DFS. So I wanted to review results and talk about it some here. Start with DFS. Had a really honestly shockingly great year in cash, especially on DraftKings. Had a 63% win rate in head-to-head, third best ever for me. Had a 22.7% ROI in head-to-head, second best ever for me. And by the way, tracking data here back to the 2015 season, you can see all this stuff on the bankroll tracker tool on Solver. That's totally free. But anyways, to have one of my best cash years ever in the year 2024, just never could have expected that. And I was trying to think through why that may have been the case. Three ideas. First, people are still bad. I mean, Josh Dobbs was only 65% owned in the $25 single entry double up Sunday. We didn't even list any quarterbacks other than Josh Dobbs in top plays. I really didn't think there were any other options. But 35% of the field said, nah, no thanks. And we see stuff like this every week. People just puking on themselves with bad mistakes. Second reason that I think may have had a really strong year. Investment in our projections and data side teams. We know that we need to stay ahead of the market in order to win. Market is getting sharper, faster, can't just keep rolling out our same process every year. Have to give massive shout out to Sam W, Brat, Connor, Leone, data side team. Our projections were markedly better this season. And yes, we can actually quantify that by looking at our projections versus actual results in a smart way. It's not just something that we say out of our ass. But yeah, those guys looked at things in the offseason like, hey, we have been under projecting starting running backs in Thursday night games. There's not really an effect there historically. Let's tighten that up. Or hey, when players are listed questionable on the injury report, even if they play through that questionable tag, here's the historical results. And we were over projecting them. And then we can apply that to projection. And then we have, true ball knowers like Mark and Jack spending countless hours on the splits and the shares for player usage every week, which is always changing due to injury and changing game plans and everything. Myself, Dink, Wiggins, Thorman, Herzig, Amico, Cody, Daigle, Court, Silva, Brat. We're all looking at this stuff and trying to make every projection as perfect as we can. And it's been a massive undertaking, but honestly, that's kind of what it takes these days. The combination of elite data science, modeling, algo work, with also grinding our cocks down to 3.9 inches for information and ball knowing. So honestly, just really proud of our team and so happy we were able to have such great results on the projection side this season. And that flowed through to props as well. I mean, we struggled last season in NFL props, broke around even. Market got really tough. But this year went 215 and 144 in props for a massive 15.7% ROI. And that's taking only widely available stuff later in the week, not picking off some random MGM line, not picking off injury news stuff. So anyways, long way of saying shout out to everyone on the NFL team. Really, really impressed and proud of the work we did. Third thought on my cash results from this year. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think simply running hot was a big part of it. Only 18 main slates really isn't a big sample. When the close 2v2s or 1v1s go your way, you're going to look like a genius. And yeah, you don't get to a 22% ROI in head to head without running hot to some degree. On top of that, I also didn't play as big as I have in the past. I've talked about this on here before, but I don't want to let results from DFS, affect my mood with my family or burn me out on ETR stuff. So yeah, playing smaller, I'm sure had something to do with results as well. As for my results in DFS tournaments for the 2024 season, wasn't great. On DraftKings, I just got absolutely buried. I don't even think I got a sweat all year in DraftKings tournaments, lost 34% there. Played more tournaments on FanDuel, did better there, had a couple sweats, but no real hits, won 5% on tournaments on FanDuel. I'm not really sure what to say here. A typical GPP bro would just say, oh, well, you can play great in tournaments for a year or 2 years or 3 years and lose, or they'd say, oh, you're not going to believe this, but I was a 2v2 away from winning all the money, All that matters in tournaments is getting lucky that one day, putting yourself in a position to get lucky on that one day, that one team make a big score. I had 1.2% of my entries finish in the top 1% of tournaments. So a little better than average, nothing spectacular. But it's just so hard to tell if you're playing well in tournaments. A couple things that you can use to evaluate. First, post-lock sims. On Solver, you can go in after a slate, enter the team that you played in the specific contest that you played, and based on the actual ownership from that contest, it will give you your expected ROI and cash rate. But note that assumes that our player projections going into the slate were right. If you have a take, if you have an IKB and I know better off of our projections, it's not going to look good in post-lock sims most likely. Second way to tell if you're playing, you can try to tell if you're playing well in GPPs is the top 1% bucket thing that I mentioned. Can also see that in the Solver bankroll tracker. Idea is that if you're getting more shots on goal than average, more top 1% finishes than average, one day you'll run hot and hit something. But the bottom line is my overall, lifetime results in DFS tournaments looks great because I had a 250K score a couple years ago. Does that mean that I'm a great tournament player? Definitely not. I'm not. So that's why I rebel against all this nonsense about hating on cash, etc. If you're good in cash, you will realize your equity. If you're bad, you will lose. And when you're playing for money, not for shits and giggles, I think that's important. And it's important for my mental state to not just get my teeth kicked in tournaments every week while maybe theoretically playing well. It's hard to tell. So yeah, that puts a bow on DFS 2024. Let's go to best ball. Okay, so best ball, I had the nightmare of all nightmare best ball seasons. Basically anything that could have gone wrong went wrong. I put $17,296 into play in best ball, cashed out for $2,908 for a loss of $14,388. Just incredibly bad, incredibly tilting. My main focus was on the $555 buy-in tournament on DraftKings. I put 20 into that contest. And it's crazy. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, all the running backs like that, they were going way higher on DraftKings than they were on Underdog. Even though DraftKings is a much more favorable scoring system for wide receivers than running backs with the full PPR and the 100-yard bonus. Underdog is just incredibly touchdown dependent scoring, incredibly quarterback and running back heavy scoring. So anyway, I just couldn't fathom reaching up for those running back types on DraftKings. I had 4% Saquon Barkley on Underdog, 1% on DraftKings. I had 19% Derrick Henry on Underdog, 0.8% on DraftKings. I had 14.5% Josh Jacobs on Underdog, 7% on DraftKings. So now the question becomes, was that a mistake? Was being so underweight those running backs on DraftKings, was that a mistake? Obviously, with the benefit of results in hindsight, clearly it was a mistake. I thought the wide receiver thirst on Underdog went way too far, but still thought there were sharper drafters on there. On DraftKings, I just thought it was brain dead sportsbook dolts and overall fish taking Saquon and Henry at the 1-2 turn, given the scoring format. And I thought I was just printing EV by being wide receiver heavy early. And even now, I'm not even sure that was a mistake. Now, you could argue, what I think you can definitely argue is that I should be diversifying more structurally. I don't love over diversifying in terms of players just for the sake of diversifying. I've talked about that on here before. But yeah, so many of my teams in DraftKings Best Ball look the same. One running back in the first 4 rounds, sometimes none. Ton of wide receivers early, middle or late quarterbacks, a ton of running backs through round 7 through 12 range. And I thought that structure was right given the way the ADP is set up, but maybe it was a mistake, especially with so much of my focus on one contest to not diversify structurally. As for player takes, which I still think is like the most important thing for best ball and fantasy, etc., was not my best season for player takes. The late round stuff, I'm not too worried about. The opportunity cost there is so low. I did have a big hit in the late rounds with Bo Nix. He was my most drafted quarterback, but I whiffed on Noah Fant, who I had a ton of late, whiffed on Marshawn Lloyd, which I took a ton of early in the process, whiffed on Andre Yoshivas pretty hard. Again, like the whiffs late don't matter nearly as much as the guys drafted higher. In terms of guys drafted with more draft capital spent, my most drafted players this season in best ball were number 1, Chase Brown, number 2, Rashee Rice, 3, DeAndre Swift, 4, Nico Collins, 5, Evan Ingram, 6, Jerome Ford, 7, T. Higgins, 8, Jordan Addison, 9, Hollywood Brown, 10, Dalton Kincaid. So had one huge hit with Chase Brown as my most drafted guy. You can probably call T. Higgins a hit, even though he missed so many games. The rest just weren't great. And so you can start to see how this went really, really bad for me. Structurally, I whiffed, at least on DraftKings, not so much on Underdog, but structurally, I whiffed on DraftKings. And then I thought I had some incredible positions on Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Nico Collins, Godwin, Rashid Shaheed. They all got hurt. And meanwhile, my teams, which are set up to take advantage of the annual running back chaos, well, there wasn't a ton of chaos at the position this year. Basically every running back stayed healthy while all the best wide receiver picks got hurt. So look, it's easy to say, well, Adam, it's just one slate. One best ball season is equivalent to one slate, and wild things happen, and I just got unlucky. That's not what I want to say. That is so weak. Of course, there are going to be seasons where running backs smash and wide receivers get hurt. I probably should be accounting for that more while drafting. The ironic part is that if I had played more Underdog, I probably would have had a much better year. I'm definitely going to keep that in mind for next year. Underdog is just similar to playing cash on FanDuel before FanDuel added the yardage bonuses. When I play cash on FanDuel, I'm trying to pay up massively most weeks for quarterback, pay up for running back, and then kind of spray and pray at wide receiver. It was so cheap to do that on Underdog this year. On DraftKings, it wasn't that cheap. Running backs were going very high relatively, which, really broke my brain. Anyway, I do think this best ball season was an outlier in terms of straight injuries. Forget about performance, just all the best wide receivers getting hurt and all the running backs staying healthy. I'd for sure bet against that happening again. And we did start to see it late in the year. My teams were starting to really come on a bunch as running backs started to go down. Guys like Bucky Irving started and Chase Brown started going nuts, but it was just a little bit too little too late. And when we review data from this season, I want to be really careful about sample size. It's really hard. We have 4 or 5 seasons of best ball data now, 4 or 5 slates. Would you make sweeping conclusions about what's right to do off of 4 or 5 DFS slates? Of course you wouldn't. What is funny to me is the best ball bros. And believe me, I'm a best ball bro. I fucking love it. I can't wait for next season. I can't wait to start drafting. But, the best ball bros are like, man, I got to draft. Someone's going to turn $20 into $1 million drafting a fantasy football team. I mean, buddy, that happens 4 times a week in DFS. There are million makers literally every week in DFS at different price points. We just had a DFS tournament, the biggest one ever, with $2 million to first. There's a $20 buy-in every week with $1 million to first. So yeah, I get it. Drafting during the summer when there's not a lot else going on, it's the fucking best. But let's not act like there's not a stone cold lotto. And yes, things like Best Ball Mania, and the DraftKings Millie Best Ball. Those are just like the DFS lottos in terms of realizing your expectation. Let's not act like salary cap DFS doesn't have the opportunity to turn 20 into a million in lotto format every single week. Oh, actually, I should mention season long. I really hope a ton of you smashed in season long. I really think we had the right strategy there. Talked so much and for so long about how season long home leagues are incredibly different than best ball. Talked about going heavy running back early in season long and then adding more running backs later, kind of a barbell approach at running back. And that made sense given the ADPs in home leagues because you could get insane wide receiver plays in rounds 4 through 9 in season long. In best ball, that just wasn't possible. So if you did take 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds of your season long draft and then came back and had a hit with Chase Brown or Bucky or something like that, or Rico Dowdle or something, hopefully you did well. It's just a reminder of how different all these formats are. Seems like all the same stuff, but it's so, so different. All right, need to get to listener questions, but first, a few organizational things. First, playoff best ball action is piping hot right now. If you're a best ball subscriber, check out our rankings and strategy content on that. If you're new to those streets, highly recommend that you watch the 2 free YouTube videos we have out on it. If you're looking for help, Solver tool for the playoff best ball is live. You can check that out at the Solver. Follow the links in the subscribe tab on ETR. Second, normal content schedule for us now through the Super Bowl on the DFS side. There will just be some changes on times of shows and stuff like that. Stay tuned to Twitter, Discord, and the menu for more there. 3, NBA is in full swing. Happy to announce 2 things. First, we've added Squirrel Patrol, aka John, formerly of Roto Grinders, to our NBA DFS team. Second, really excited about that. John's super sharp players had insane success. And second NBA note, we broke off the full stat projections for NBA into a separate subscription. So if you don't care about DFS, you don't care about getting our props plays, you just want to see exactly what we have for every player in every game in terms of how many exact rebounds, assists, 3-pointers, etc. Full stat subscription on the NBA side is for you. Check that out on the subscribe page. 4, golf season started last week. We've been putting a ton of effort into improving our golf content and projections and modeling, hoping to have sims ready on Solver for your golf sometime this summer. But yeah, if you're into golf, our content schedule for that is on the site right now. And last but not least, playoff fantasy contest. We will have rankings for FFPC, NFFC, regular playoff ranks. Those will be up by the time you listen to this, hopefully, part of both Draft Kit and in season. I know some of this stuff can get confusing. Please do not hesitate to shoot me a note if you are confused about anything. Gives me chest pains. Like disorganization gives me chest pains. So we're doing our best to keep everything organized, but I know it's a lot. All right, enough is enough. It is time for everyone's favorite portion of the program, the listener questions. All right, going to clean out the inbox here with the final 3 questions of the season. Question 1 from Ned. He says, I visited with my cousin over Thanksgiving. Her son is 21 years old and has not yet had a girlfriend or hooked up with girls. For his birthday, she's giving him a book. It's called She Comes First. And that book details prioritizing the woman during the sex. Thoughts on this style of parenting? I think it's cool to have an open relationship with a child about sex, drugs, etc. She and her husband are reading the book together, and they say it's been an amazing read. My God, Ned. I think there's 2 different aspects here. First, my take on a lot of this stuff is kids got to figure it out on their own. That's part of growing up. That's part of becoming an adult. That's what gives kids confidence. You have to let them problem solve themselves. Telling your kid to go muff diving with a counterclockwise squirrel technique for 6.9 minutes before proceeding to the next lewd act. I mean, I don't think that's it. You got to be okay with your kids making mistakes. That's part of life. Now, the second part of it is as for being open with your kids about sex, drugs, etc. Yeah, I think that's ideal. In a perfect world, kids shouldn't be afraid or uncomfortable to talk to their parents about that stuff if they want to. But fuck, man, I don't know about the execution on that. I mean, when I was a teenager or 20 years old or fucking 42 years old, I'd rather actually cut my own cock off with scissors than talk to my parents about sex or drugs. You know, it's like, hey, Adam, you can either read the book, She Comes First, with your mom and have a talk about it, or you can go to the electric chair. I'd be like, all right, so where do you plug the chair in? And look, Ned, your cousin is probably a much better parent than me. Shout out to her, but man, that's a rough ride. Second question from Noah. He said, you said we should watch all the podcasts on YouTube for enhanced experience. Does this mean I should take transit to work and watch them instead of driving and listening, lengthening my commute by 20 minutes each way? Does watching add that much value over time? Yeah, so what Noah's referring to here, almost all the audio pods you listen to, we put them on YouTube. And over the last couple of years, we've added some editors, some great producers, and watching the shows on YouTube instead of just listening is certainly better. You get highlights as we talk about guys. You can scroll it. There's a scroll at the bottom with rankings, data, etc. Just a better experience. However, Noah, you absolutely should not lengthen your commute for this. In fact, there are very few things in life I would say that are worth lengthening your commute for. I mean, who knows how true the data is, but there's been multiple reports out there that these two things are like the stone cold keys to happiness in life. First, who you marry, or your relationship. Literally, nothing is more important for your happiness. Marry the right person, have a great relationship, work at it. You're going to have a happy life, or at least you're far, far, far more likely to. And second thing, which I wouldn't have thought of, is commute time. I mean, who knows how true this stuff is, but there are reports and research out there that shows a direct correlation between the length of a person's commute and that person's happiness. In other words, people with a 1 hour commute each way daily are miserable fucks, which quite frankly makes intuitive sense. I mean, public transportation, driving in traffic, it's all a hellscape. We've talked about maybe getting an ETR office, but God, I would be infinitely less productive and on so much more tilt. So, anyways, there it is. Easy game. Marry the right person and move to a place you have a very short or zero commute. No problem. Third and final question comes from Luke. He says, is there a place in the marketplace for fact checking traditional stat companies? I collect soccer/football data for a living and find errors more frequently than you would imagine. Would you pay for this? Yeah, I mean, it's truly crazy how much money swings on the decisions of stat keepers. And there's actually an edge there, or at least there was. I mean, I can remember certain scorekeepers in NBA games would be wildly loose with assists for their home team. Same with blocks and steals, which can be a bit subjective. And yeah, I'm sure there's mistakes all the time. I don't doubt it, Luke. I'm sure you're finding tons of mistakes. There are stat corrections later in the week for NFL, but DraftKings and FanDuel, they pay out. At least for NFL, they pay out before final stat corrections. They pay out right after the slate on Sunday. Bottom line is, we're players. We have to play by the rules on the site. Me paying you, Luke, to see all the places the stats are wrong, that does nothing because DraftKings doesn't care. They aren't going to adjust the standings for it. Their house rules are that the official stats from their official data provider right after the game are final. I think a better question would be, should DraftKings and FanDuel wait to pay out a slate until after all the stats are checked and final and official, which can take days? I mean, maybe, but that's just never going to happen. They want you to get your money ASAP so you can put it back in play and get raked again. And honestly, users want to be paid out ASAP also. Underdog held off paying out Best Ball Mania, I think, until all the stats were final on like the Wednesday after week 17, and people were having a fucking heart attack over it. So I definitely get what you're saying, Luke, but don't think anything is going to change on that front. All right. That is going to do it for the 2024 solo pod. I know I say it every year, but the fact that we get to do this stuff for a quote unquote job is just an incredible gift. And it would not be possible without all of you. So truly, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for listening, engaging, following along all season. We really do appreciate you. For producer Luke, for Jerry, for everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.